Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super Fantify. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Banished Court Magician Aims to Become the Strongest, Season 1, Episode 5. Great episode, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're immediately picking up where the last episode left. It's up to Alec to deal with the final blow to the Dullahan. He's raining down thunderbolts, a whole bunch of them, but it's still not enough. This thing is breaking free of Yura's seal spell, and Alec is kind of burned through so much of his stamina and like mana, so it's like, yeah, he's on his last leg. But then it's kind of like, no, there's so many people counting on me, so I can't falter now. So in one last push, he ends up something. Kind of reminds me of like almost like, it's been so long since I like saw this part of Naruto, but like what was that thunder jutsu that Sasuke used? Was it Kirin? I believe it. I don't remember if that thing was a dragon. I swear it was, but I can't remember. But either way, this kind of reminded me of that. But just like one final, I also like how it looked, where it's like all the like seals to like the spell, like the two like came together and then formed this like gate for like the dragon to come out, and it consumes the Dullahan and it completely evaporates the thing. In one fell swoop, Alec won, and he beat the Dullahan, but he lost the bet between him and Ornest because you passed out first. And it's like, wait, is that why you Gunner didn't ban me? It's like, yeah, why get caught up in like, you lost, don't whine about it, And so I was like, right, your punishment would be something heavy, but I'm going to cut you some slack. Essentially, his punishment now going forward is don't bottle anything up. Well, all that you've had to deal with the past 4 years, if there's anything going on, you come to one of us. At least one of us you need to talk to about this, And I thought it was kind of an interesting continuation of, was it episode 2, the Tracia conversation and they even recap it a little of her being like, yeah, like I'm not going to ask you about everything you went through, how you ended up here again, and what happened, but I'm here to listen if you would, and it's like, right, rely on us. Don't bottle everything up like you have been up until this point in time. And obviously he tears up a little because it means the world to him, because he's kind of just had to he's had to take all that bullshit and just like the frustrations of it all. This has kind of been the first time he's ever to kind of rely on anyone, because he was kind of on his own island when he was dealing with everything with the prince. He kind of went with it. Like I said, he suffered them berating him, looking down upon him, and it just, once again, he had to also make himself smaller to make the prince feel better about himself. But and then, like I said, the end result is beautiful all around. They successfully helped out the other party, get proper introductions to everyone. What's her name? Maribel ends up kissing him, which Yora was not a fan of. It's like, oh, like we should like go dungeon hunting again. It's like, no. He's our magician, not yours, so skedaddle. Loki proceeds to get the crap beat out of him when he accidentally touches on Yora and Krasia. And then he's kind of like, well, I forgot, he made some kind of remark about kind of owing them. Well, he makes some remark of like, this couldn't have been possible without them. And then Krasia and Ornest, the one time they join forces together, is them shitting on Loki, being like, oh, didn't he just say that he couldn't have done this without us? I guess that means he owes us, right? And so the conversation also came up about how he was untrustworthy. Literally everyone there is like, nope, you can't be trusted. I don't trust you. Even the leader of his team, his party, Rinwell, was like, nah, I can't trust you either. Nope, you can't be trusted. So kind of laughing at his expense, and everyone kind of goes their separate ways at the end of it all. And obviously the lasting period is kind of officially back now. And this is kind of a nice step forward. Oh yeah, because they were bringing up the conversation of, he could, because they're an S-rank party, you need the recommendation of like not only the guildmaster's approval, but also a recommendation from an S-class party member to be able to raise your rank to S-class. So Loki, that's what sparked the whether he could be trusted conversation to kind of like follow through on that promise. But suddenly, our boy, who knows how much time passed, like whether it's like maybe the next day or whatever, in the aftermath of everything, but they end up, or rather, Alec gets a surprise visitor. It's Vogon, which I love. Vogon's kind of like a no-nonsense person. Like, he keeps up with the formalities because he kind of had to last episode when we were introduced to him. But basically, he calls out Alec, like, why did you let him continue not knowing how weak he was? But then Alec was like, actually forgetting what exactly Alec said. He made some remark that there's some truth to it, and I just can't remember what it was. Oh, right, I remember what it was. He was like, if I can, he's like, if I told the prince that from the beginning, do you think he would have listened to me? And even Volgon was kind of like, yeah, that's true. Like, the prince is so stubborn. If you really pointed out how weak he is, because he's too egotistical and prideful to ever listen to that. And that becomes like a thing they got to deal with, is like how he believes himself to be right. He basically smells his own farts and believes himself right, because I guess he has generations of like his family running things, and he kind of thinks because he's the prince and the next in line that he knows all that is right because of the systems that their country and kingdom has been built off of. He exemplifies and represents that. So like, how could I be wrong? I'm kind of like the symbolization of everything that is our kingdom. So like, of course I can't be wrong. But yeah. And so, but Vogon also talks about something interesting too, where he was like, yeah, I'm a noble, because he talks shit about nobility or something like that, and it's like, could you really be saying that as a noble? And Vogan's like, I don't care, like, I never let my nobility dictate anything. I live my life the way I want to. I'm not going to essentially give a shit about the nobility side of things. So, but basically, he brought the prince here because the prince is like stuck on Alec, and it's like, right. And this is also something Alec needs as well, because he's like, yeah, I got a few words for the prince as well too. I believe it was here, or was it from the prince himself? He had heard like, the king. It might have been Vogon that told him. I can't remember now. Who told him about the king's decision to try and change things. But either way, they have their confrontation, and the prince, his whole identity is crumbling, because he's, like I said, he's identified himself as always being right, and now realizing how wrong he was, believing in his own strength, and that all kind of faltered. Now it's kind of like, who am I outside of that? Like, so he needs to shut down Alec, because if he can beat Alec, he can be like, right, my father's wrong to try and change things. We don't need to change things. I am right to believe in what I believe in, what I was raised up in. Because he's like, if you undo what has kind of been something I've always known, he's defined himself by being the prince and having the perspective that his kingdom has had. And it's like, you would basically, it's like, what would the past 15 years of my life, did they not mean anything? If I've been following life that, like so many others, even his father before him, kind of believed and saw the world and viewed it a certain way and viewed their kingdom a certain way. And it's like, you're so just changing that all of a sudden, like, you know, when your beliefs are so integral to who you are, which they are to some degree, but it's like, if they, like, who are you outside of like what you were raised to believe? It's almost just kind of like, you've never had a chance to grow outside of that. You've been boxed into this position, and you let yourself remain boxed in there, and you've kind of built up more layers to that box over the years, because you've doubled, tripled, quadrupled, and quintupled. I'm probably saying that wrong. I should have stopped at quadruple. I wouldn't have made myself look stupid there. But, and so it's like, right, by beating Alec, he can prove like, right, you're wrong, not me, and I can keep some form of reins over who I am. And so he challenges him to a fight, and Alec kind of accepts it, you know, because obviously, like I said, he has things to say too, because it's like, because it turns out the way the prince said it almost sounded like they challenged the level 34 like multiple times, it sounds like, and walked away, lost. And then obviously this most recent situation was like the worst of them all. But either way, but he saw Alec's notes, and Alec's notes are what pissed him off, because he was like, they were perfect. They accounted for everything. Who I am, my personality, like, you are a true genius, and that frustrates him even more, because once again, he gets so caught up in the nobility versus commoner thing, and he just refuses to back down. He's too prideful, because it would mean admitting wrong, and not only himself, but all that he believes in. Like I said, that's all just wrapped into his how he values himself. And so he fights Alec, but he's using an artifact, but it's two daggers. In fact, Alec had previously given him the advice, you shouldn't use a long sword because it's too heavy for you. And there was even, and I think that's kind of nice tying that into like last episode, even the prince being like, oh, my sword, it feels heavy in my hands. And, and obviously fighting Alex, seeing like, oh, your support spells. He's like, that's the only reason why I made it so far was because of you. I thought it was by my own pure strength, but it's like, no, you were helping me out a lot. Obviously helping the party out a lot too, but I'm sure the other two in his squad, I'm so curious to see what happens post all of this. They probably still support the prince and stuff like that because they're nobles as well, and they probably don't want to turn their back on, the crown prince and stuff like that. So, yeah, they're probably close enough with him to be very ride or dies, but they're also probably like, it probably looked bad upon them if they bailed on the crown prince, probably looked bad upon their family, so... But I mean, maybe they generally like the prince too. I mean, he wasn't the only one that has a shitty personality. They did too, but it's like because they believe in the system too of like nobles being so great. So it's not like he's the only one that had that perspective. The other two in the party shared that like perspective as well. So I'm curious to see what that means for them in the long run, like what they thought of in the aftermath of everything. Once again, that mage not knowing like, oh right, the papers she tore up in episode 1 were the things that would have helped them get past the 30th floor. It was actually Vogon that suggested this whole thing, like not only the switching over to the daggers, but it's like, yeah, you want to prove him, because he's like, right, talk is cheap. I believe in someone. Now, action, he's like, now that's something I can respect. So he's like, right, if he wants to prove himself right and prove you wrong, then by going about that, he has to like fight you to kind of determine that. And obviously, it's a very one-sided thing. Like, Alex not even like pulling out any major spell. He doesn't even use any of his magic really in that fight, except for that one shield. But he's just like blocking him with like his wand. Bam, 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 bam. Like it's nothing. And it's just like, he's getting, like, the prince is exhausted afterwards. And so, Alec, because the prince ends up saying, like, right, everything that you and I did was all for the purpose of, my father was testing me the entire time. And he's like, right, you are a pawn in all this, you were being used. But Alec, instead of seeing the negative of it, he actually saw the opposite of it. It made him feel better about himself, because it came up last episode of like that feeling and regret, feeling like what he wasted the past 4 years, all that he was aiming to do for the court, like it amounted to nothing. What was it all for then? But now they hear like, oh, the king has changed his mind. It's kind of nice. Like, right, he has changed. He's changing his mind and his perspective. That means all that I did these past 4 years, they meant something. They weren't a complete waste. So like, the goal I had in mind, it was the feeling like it was all wasted and nothing was gained from it. I think a lot was gained from it. Those experiences, like I think he couldn't quite see it because he was so focused on the negatives, because that's all he saw. That's all he knew was like, oh, nothing's changed. But hearing there has been a change, and that whole experience has reunited you with lasting period, and it's kind of helped you grow as an individual. Those experiences matter in the long run. So there was never a waste from it, but he's gained a lot more from it. There's been a lot more gained in general than he initially estimated. So, but yeah, he draws his artifact, which I didn't know Loki was just going to let him keep that. I mean, I see he has it in the opening and stuff, but I didn't realize he was allowed to just keep it. So yeah, I guess that's just his going for it. I guess that was also kind of like, yeah, you went along with my plan. You utilizes it pretty well, so it's kind of yours. It's kind of not that big of a deal to lose it, because I guess like it's better in someone's like Alec's hands anyway. But either way, Alec draws the sword and draws a whole bunch of energy and deals a powerful blow. Hell, cuts into the ground, but completely misses the prince. And the prince was shaking, dropped his weapons. But even he's like, why didn't you strike me down? Because for him, it's like, I would rather you kind of strike me down, and that would kind of prove something in the long run, because he can't, because it's almost like I'd rather fall in battle than kind of have to continue existing with like feeling the way I'm feeling, like that I like, because I just don't know who I am, because it almost felt like the battlefield, like my death would almost give me a purpose, because in the long run, he's like, if you struck me down, then this would give my father pause, and maybe he won't go along with the changes he wanted. Things would stay the same, and that would almost mean like my death mattered, I mattered, I was right even in death. It's like you're very twisted, like his ego has twisted him into such a knot that was even a thought. It's kind of crazy and sad. Alec can't even help but laugh at the situation because he's like, right. He's like, the fact is, I was just as mad as you about this whole situation, but it was something about the whole encounter that he was just like, right. I think it was specifically maybe hearing about the king's change of mind made him go like, right, I kind of ended up letting it all go, all those frustrations. Like, right, we still obviously have issues with each other, and there's that frustration there, but, it's kind of like, we're kind of moving past that, because this was necessary for both of them to move past this, to bury the past and move forward, but also to vent their frustrations about the whole situation. So even the prince apologizing him, telling him he's sorry and stuff like that, it's like, wow, never would have thought you'd hear that from him, recognizing that he's wrong. And so it's like, cool, fine, here, and gives him back the cloak as the court magician. And there's a letter from his dad, so it's like, hey, you are welcome back anytime. And even Alex like, is that an order? And it's like, no, it's more of a request. And he's like, then I turn it down. He's like, that's not where I belong anymore. The party I'm with, kind of like, there's kind of a whole rule against leaving thing, but it's like, I have no intention to go back to the court. This is where I am, and this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. So this is where I'm staying. But they do give him the cloak back regardless, which even, the prince is like, you're kind of a fool for turning down this position. And it's like, well, you already knew I was a fool, right? A worthless commoner. And he's like, I hate you. And it's like, likewise, I guess that's the one thing we both have in common. And as the prince is walking, he smiles, because it's like, it was a growing experience for him. It was something just like Alec needed it to find his way forward, so did the prince. And I think he probably still have some of his very irksome, nasty personality quirks, but at the very least, this will help him grow and change. So we'll see if there. I'm curious to see, because it's interesting. Like, if this is the wrap up to that, I'm curious to see if there's any follow up to this later in the story. Because like, this is only episode 5. I actually haven't checked to see how many episodes this season is. I can only assume it's going to be like the classic, like 12 or 13. Looking it up, it said 12 episodes, but I'm gonna keep my hesitancy about it, because once again, I've been lied to too many times, or like, misinformed too many times. So for it to turn around and be like, oh, actually it's 13 episodes, so I'll take that still with for mostly truth, but a slight grain of salt in my head. Either way, but first, you wrap that up immediately, I think it's kind of interesting. So it makes me wonder, like will the whole changing of the court and like that kingdom's perspective on things, like, obviously that's not going to be something you can probably change completely overnight. It will probably be a slow burning thing in the background. I wonder, will we cut back to it as the story progresses, or it's just kind of like, this is the end here and you won't really have any reason to, unless there's reason for those storylines to cross again in the future. Kind of like Orness was like, oh, we become such a big deal that kingdom has to request us for help, and then we can turn them down. But now that the bad blood is kind of relatively squashed, I could see them like wholeheartedly being like, no, let's accept it, or at least Alec being more okay with it. So I'm sure he's going to talk to the others about this experience in the aftermath of everything. So yeah, like I said, I'd be interested to catch up with the prince again and see how much he's grown and how this plays out with his interaction with the party. And I guess Vogun, like the whole point of Vogun 2 is like to play. It's like, oh, they got a new magician. He's like, new magician, more like new babysitter for that little shit. So I guess that's like Vogun's like position there, like the kind of, because he was told, and it's something that because he's basically meant to look after the prince. I mean, to be fair, like even Alex said the same thing about like, right, his job was to protect the prince. That's the order that the king gave him. So yeah, I'm curious to see, will this also involve Alec eventually running into Eldest and telling him about the changes, or will Eldest find out about it? It's like, oh, like how much is changing, and that it was on Alec that did that. Will word spread about this, or will it just kind of go under the radar? Because I mean, obviously Alec's going to be boosting his name and reputation with the lasting party and with their continued success. But like in the aftermath of all of this, like will the king put out a notice to be like, well, Alec decided to leave, and not as much of a firing thing. I wonder, will there be any like run back on that, or will it just kind of, it is what it is, and just kind of move past that? I don't know. I'm really curious to see what the next episode involves, where we go from here on all fronts. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.